Here's the first of my Ace MIcropro 8000 radios. This one is very, very clean. I think it was used very little from the original owner. And as you can see, it still has the original FM antenna installed. It's removable, it just unscrews. I'll leave it screwed in there for now. But the overall condition of the radio case is excellent. I mean, it's literally like brand new. There's no yellowing, no damage of any sort. The vinyl decals are in excellent, just basically like brand new condition. All the switches have a very crisp operation with no play whatsoever. LCD is in excellent shape. This side has a charging jack, and go ahead and let you see the top of it here. Let me fold this antenna down. This switch here is for the dual RF deck. In the B position is where I decided to plug in the 2.4 gigahertz module. So if you power up the radio in the switch position B, it'll be on 2.4 gigahertz. If it's on A, it will be in the FM RF deck will get power. And then it has a center capture position where if you power up the radio in that center position, it won't enable any RF broadcast. So if you're going to be doing a lot of programming on it and you don't want to be eating up battery life because you're transmitting RF, that would be an option for you. And then of course here is the run and calibrate switch. The other mix switch is up here on top. The auto trim button and the channel 5 toggle. This little 3-position switch is to select whether or not you're going to be using a non-telemetry receiver in that position. Center position is if you're using a telemetry receiver, and the third or left position is for performing updates to the 2.4 gigahertz FrSky module. So I always leave it in that position because I don't have any telemetry type receivers. I use the non-telemetry type. But as you can see, the sticks are in really good shape, as are the gimbals. This does have a ratcheted throttle. I like a smooth throttle. It's got just the right amount of tension so it'll stay where you leave it. But I didn't alter the throttle ratchet. I just inserted a thin piece of plastic material between the piece of spring steel that rides on the ratchet, and so that could easily be removed if you wanted to go back to a ratchet throttle. This 2.4 gigahertz antenna, I just mounted. There is a hole already present in these cases when they came from Ace, and these radios did not come with a snap roll switch or an alternate aircraft switch installed. The user could choose to add that to their radio by ordering a switch kit from Ace. So to add this switch for the 2.4 gigahertz module and to install the antenna, I didn't have to drill any holes into the case. I just used the ones that were already there present under the decal. So I did have to kind of cut a hole in the decal to mount those two items. So let me go ahead and turn it around. And the back is in really good shape too. It even has the original placard holder and cards for the model memory, which the original programming that this radio came with, each model memory just had a number, a memory location number. It didn't actually have the aircraft name or model name. But the later revisions, the later EPROMs that you could install on this radio added that functionality. This, I think it's got the level, I'll confirm it when I open the case, but I think it's got a level 6 EPROM, and you can actually name your models, which is nice. So when you're selecting model memories, you actually see the model name instead of just a number. But back then, people would have to write, model memory 1 is such and such an aircraft. They'd have to refer to that to know which memory position, depending on what model that they were wanting to fly. This indicates that this radio was from February 1997, or at least that's when it passed that RF check. So this is a later versus an earlier ACE radio. I'm not sure how long they sold this particular radio, but I would have a feeling that was probably towards the end of its production. So as you can see, the RF deck on the back panel, it has an FM deck, and it's on the 6-meter ham band, 53.5 megahertz. Those 2 holes there is where this was installed. I went ahead and removed it since I installed the 2.4 gigahertz, but this is actually an AM deck, and it happens to be on that same frequency. So the original owner must have been a ham guy, and he had dual RF decks, so he could operate either on AM or FM. And back then when he was at the flying field, if somebody else was flying on that FM frequency, he could just switch it over to the AM and fly it no problem. So that way you wouldn't have to wait as long to get your turn to fly. So I can include this also. Here's the inside of that particular radio. So you can see the FM deck there installed on the back panel. The AM had been mounted right below it. I guess I could have left it in there. There's room here, in this area right here. It could probably fit in there, but I just removed it just to free up a little bit of room. And let's see, it does have the level 6 EPROM installed, so that added quite a bit of functionality to the programming. Actually naming the models, putting a model name in the programming is just one of them. There's actually several in there. This actually has a Sanyo NICAD pack installed, but I also have this ProTech Life Pack. It's a 3-cell Life Pack. It's a 1600 milliamp hour battery, so quite a bit more capacity than the original battery. The voltmeter, internal voltmeter of this radio has been calibrated. It was close to a volt off, and I used a adjustable power supply that you can adjust while it's powered on, basically a lab power supply, and was able to calibrate the internal voltmeter on this, so it's got an accurate battery reading when you turn it on. So it has both the NICAD pack, which you can use the actual ACE wall charger to charge through the charge port here on the side of the radio case, or you can install this Life Pack, and you can see how thin it is. So it's just as thin as the NICAD pack, so there's no space issues inside the case, and you get a lot longer battery runtime out of that battery than the NICADs also. I didn't alter any of the wiring. All the wiring has these smaller 3-pin Deans connectors, so that's what I used to wire in. There's a 2.4 gigahertz module. That's a good location, as it allowed me to mount the board that has the status light and the bind button, as well as the 3-position switch, all kind of in that area. And then the wire to come over here for the mount for the antenna was long enough to reach from this side over to here. And that way it's out of the way, it doesn't interfere with the case snapping on or coming off, and it's not, the gimbal can operate no problem with it in that location. There you can see that little thin piece of plastic I have between the spring steel and the ratchet to make it a smooth throttle. All you'd have to do is just pull that little piece of plastic out and then you would have a ratchet throttle if you so wish. But you can see how clean the interior is. I mean, everything's basically like brand new in this radio. So that's an inside look. Next I'll go ahead and power it on. Okay, so let's go ahead and power it on. So it's sitting right at 10 volts right now. And as you can see there, you can actually name the model memory. So that's model memory number 2. And that model there is my Super Zoom, which is a foam 3D airplane. And I think you can hit the auto trim button, and it tells you that's what I think that's a low voltage cutoff voltage, and that's the number of minutes it's been on total battery time. And you can go in a menu and actually reset that. So when you charge your battery and get it topped off, you can reset that so you can keep track of how long it's been since your last charge. So that's kind of a neat function. There's also a way to program in the pilot name, you know, the pilot owner. Let me see if I can hold my phone and do this. I think you hold in the option button and power the radio on, and as you can see there, it's got my name, and I put my AMA number in there, and then when you release the option button, it goes back to the standard screen there. And as you can see, I've got the switch in position B, so the 2.4 gigahertz module is enabled. And that particular DFT module, this is actually what the status light does for normal operation. I thought the first time I saw that, I thought it was in bind mode, but the only way to get it in bind mode is to hold that button down while you power the radio on. So I had to go on the forum and look that up, and a lot of people make that assumption. They think that flashing, that high-speed flashing there means that it's in bind mode. It's not. It's actually normal operation for it to look like that. Let's go ahead and go into, let me put it in, it's kind of hard to do this while I hold my phone, put it in calibrate mode. And if you're familiar with this radio, you know you use the aileron and elevator stick to go through. So here's the major. It's got an extended menu. I'll show you what's in that. You can change your shift select for your FM. You can change, actually program what alarm voltage you want. So if you're using NiCad, your alarm voltage is going to be different than if you're using a life battery. I forget what that is. This is where you can turn off or turn on the auto trim, which I really like to use the auto trim. It's a very handy feature. So I go in and I program on my model memories to null the trim authorities on these manual trims out. That way if you bump them, it doesn't change the trim. I trim the aircraft solely with the auto trim system. And this is where you can change the channel select. So like if you wanted to make channel 8 channel 5, if you're not using a you know, like some of the pre-programmed mixes, you might have to use, let's say, channel 7 to plug in one of your servos, like for dual aileron, for example. If you don't have a 7-channel receiver, you know, you only have a 5-channel receiver, you could make channel 7 channel 5. So that's kind of handy. It's got dual elevator phase. You can list your stats. This is, at one time somebody was making a module where you could transfer model memories from the radio to this device, and then from the device back to it, to increase how many model memories you have, because this only has 8 model memories. This is to change the name of the model that you have selected, and again, that's for how to get items get model memories from that ASAP device I was telling you about, which I don't think is made anymore. I think Dan Thompson is the guy who used to make them. I don't believe he makes those any longer. So that's really just kind of superfluous programming. Here's a special function. That's where you can reset your battery timer. You can set your flight timer mode, set what your start time is for the timer. This is where you can read the automatic trim values. When you use your auto trim, you can go back in under the servo calibration and take away or add that value to what your base values were, and then reset your auto trim. And this is where you set the auto trim speed, how fast it slews when you hold that button down. And select channels, center servos, duplicate current aircraft, yada yada yada. And that gets us back to the beginning there. So that's a kind of a quick run through the menu. And I will say that this radio actually has a lot of programming available, in particular the mixes. I think you can do up to 12 mixes. It has 2 mix switches that are, basically on and off switches. You could have 4 different mixes assigned to each one of these switches. Then there's no third mix switch. Mix 3 is actually on all the time. And I'll give you, for instance, I had made a Throttle Inhibit mix, and I used mix 2, I think. I ended up redoing that because when I use mix 2, you have to turn this mix switch on, and then I had the mix assigned to channel 5. So to inhibit throttle, or basically have where the throttle is deactivated, you had to have mix switch 2 on and channel 5 in the B position. And then once you were ready, to hand launch your plane and you wanted the throttle activated, you flick this switch. Well, I ended up changing that mix over to mix 3 because it's on all the time. You don't have to remember to turn a mix switch on and off. So that way all I have to do is just operate this switch when I want to inhibit my throttle. So that position, throttle is dead, doesn't do anything, and then that position, throttle works. So there's a lot of different programming you can do, to include, like I've done flaperons where I couple dual servo ailerons into flaperons that are slave to the elevator to give you flap action, coupled with your aileron stick movement, or your elevator stick movement. So there's a lot of different mixing that can be done. So it's a pretty powerful radio, even by today's standards. So that's pretty much it as far as this goes. It looks like I need to charge the NICAD battery. I haven't charged it in a while, and it looked like it was getting pretty close to that alarm voltage. But like I said, these life batteries, they last a long time. They have a very flat discharge curve though, so you have to kind of watch that. And what I would recommend is fully charge this, reset the battery timer after you initially turn it on with this charged battery, and then just run it, maybe set an alarm voltage for like 9.5 volts, because it'll sit at like 9.6 volts for a long time. And once it gets to about 9.5, that'd be a good time to go ahead and recharge it, because once it gets down to like 9.4, 9.3, it drops off dramatically voltage wise. But like I said, you could probably fly several hours all weekend on one charge on that battery there. But I'm going to include both the NICAD and the Life battery pack, as well as these 2 FM receivers, the wall charger, and probably one of the new V8 8-channel receivers I have for the 2.4 gigahertz.